This is San Francisco.
Welcome to San Francisco. We have a very special episode for you today, and it's about landlord arson. That is the all too common practice of landlords paying someone to set fire to the buildings they own so they can get rid of poor tenants and move in richer ones. And the real cherry on top is that landlords are usually able to cash out on insurance policies on their buildings as well. It's currently the 8th anniversary of the Flays at Mission and 22nd Streets in the Mission District here in San Francisco. And 8 years after the fire that displaced more than 40 people and Latinx Market, a Popeyes, which some people may remember was famous for like fanning the scent of fried chicken out onto the street, out onto Mission. There's a massive spot of land that continues to sit empty. It's just a plot of dirt, heavy with weeds. And so this episode is dedicated to none other than the owner of that weed-laden dirt pit, slumlord Hock Ling Liu, as well as his wife, Ketty Liu, and the rest of the Ketty clan, because like many landlords, Hock Ling Liu avoids taxes and legal culpability by setting up a lot of different LLCs and putting deeds in different family members' names. It's a common landlord tactic. So today we're going to talk about landlord arson and specifically what happened at 22nd and Mission Streets and why the city continues to aid and abet landlords who let their buildings go to shit. We do have to state that everything in this piece is alleged because landlords are litigious, and having sat through hours of eviction court, a lot of judges out there are on the side of landlords. I am Toshio Moronic, and I'm a journalist. I have written for Al Jazeera, The Nation, and Truth Out, and I have a book coming out. It's called Miss Major Speaks. I'm very excited to welcome back to the show Kristen Siafi. And Kristen is reporting temporarily from Phoenix. Kristen, how would you say the landlords are coping down there in Arizona, given all the anti-landlord rhetoric coming out of the media right now, including this very podcast?
Thank you so much, Tosh. Y'all, please make sure you pre-order that book. I want to say I really like that you asked that because it's very important to rip the rug out from landlords everywhere. I would say that landlords here stay unbothered, making the lives of tenants and houseless people everywhere an absolute hell. While I was born in SoCal, I was raised here, and it's been an absolute trip to see cities and towns that were once boonies in the middle of nowhere, now exploding with condos. Little neighborhoods I used to frequent, both out in the desert and in Phoenix proper, are now super difficult to recognize. The YIMBYs, the landlords, they're all coming to a town near you. And they don't wreak havoc alone. You'll see it go hand in hand with evictions, with street sweeping, with rents exponentially rising, and of course, arson at the hands of landlords. My name is Kristen. I am a hater, sometimes writer, and I organize on the topics surrounding of houselessness and gentrification. You can follow me for my unsolicited opinions on pop culture and local politics at JFChrist_, phonetically J as in joke, F as in fuck, and Christ like Jesus _.
Thank you, Kristen. I also have to thank a new Patreon. That is Andrew.
Woo!
Much love to you. I won't dox my dear friend Andrew, but
Not
I just
today,
want to say thank you, for joining us on this wild ride into a blazing building. So back in January of 2015, there was the largest fire that San Francisco had seen in some time. A whole night was consumed in smoke and flames. There were families jumping from the second story of a building that has now, gone to shit. It's completely empty, this lot. It's weeds that are growing up out of ashes and dirt, thanks to its landlord, Hak Ling Lu, who had turned the place into a death trap where at least one person, Mauricio Oriana, was burned alive, in part because the fire alarm system was dead. And also, even if you did realize there was a fire going on in time, there were windows that were glued shut. It also didn't help that city fire inspectors hadn't been checking up on the landlord to the extent that they are legally supposed to. Our man, Hak Ling Lu, takes meetings out of his seafood market down the street. He's not hard to find. You have a landlord with a rent-controlled building, so he can't raise the rent beyond a certain amount each year. A fire could be one of the best things that happens to his bank account because insurance covers the rebuilds of a place for many landlords. And also, then any tenants who don't move back, such as those who died or who can't afford to, wait around in the city for the reconstruction and move away, this makes room for more market rate tenants. So that means more money. And around this time that the fire at 22nd and Mission happened, the then city supervisor for the Mission District, David Campos, head politician in charge for the area, told the San Francisco Examiner, quote, "There's nothing I want more than to assure my constituents that arson is not a factor in these fires." Unfortunately, at this point, I cannot say this with certainty because there was hella suspicion at this time. There were a lot of other people asking these sorts of questions. John Ronson, he interviewed someone locally who was a landlord who had paid off somebody to burn down some of his buildings for fun and profit. So you can read that interview in GQ. We'll link it in the show notes. There was a journalist named Linda Carson who's written several articles about the 2011 case of landlord Richard Singer, who in an FBI sting was found guilty of soliciting a professional arsonist from New York to fly over and burn down the Hotel Menlo, an apartment building in Oakland owned by Singer, who admitted in court that he agreed to pay this person from New York $65,000. The person ended up being a federal informant acting as an arsonist.
That's a fuck ton of money. That's to pay somebody to burn down a building. I mean, are you able to break it down? How much do you think Singer would have gotten from the, insurance and all that shit if he, was not caught?
So my response to that is I'm not sure because I don't know about the particulars of the Hotel Menlo. However, in most of these cases, the insurance will cover the landlord. And, if you're a renter, if you're a tenant, you're on your own. Hopefully you had renter's insurance. And hopefully the insurance company doesn't give you too much shit about actually cashing in on your policy. There's an emergency fund where for 2 years, the city will put you up at the same rate that you were paying. People ended up in Treasure Island. I know, having checked in with some of the people, that they were able to stay beyond 2 years because the city offer people it's not even free housing. It's somewhat subsidized housing because they were in an emergency situation in a fire in a low-income, mostly building where people would not have been able to afford to move next door, for sure.
The city gave them housing on Treasure Island that is the rent amount is equivalent to what they were paying on 22nd and Mission.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is wild to me. That is wild.
Oh, I know. Considering there's no subway stop, there's no BART stop on
Oh yeah.
Treasure Island.
Yeah, it's a, from what I hear, it's a nightmare if you work in a city, if you work, on either side
Yeah.
of the Bay Bridge and you live in Treasure Island, like it's a whole other thing. And yeah, anyways.
Not to mention the radiation.
Oh my God, exactly. Exactly.
It's a former naval base and is known for its radioactivity. Arson itself, let's talk about arson. It's a nearly perfect crime, or that's how it was described to me by Bill Smith, who's a retired fire captain from Fairfield in the Far East Bay. And he kind of explained to me how difficult they are to prove. He told me there's a very small percentage, probably less than 5%, of alleged landlord arsons that make it to court. How are you going to link someone to arson unless you actually observe them doing it? It's that tough, end quote. So Linda Carson, this journalist, speaking to me at the time and kind of proffered this quote, what was strange about Richard Singer is that he got caught before he had a chance to set his building on fire. It's very odd that people get caught. Arson itself, let's talk about arson. It's a nearly perfect crime, or that's how it was described to me by Bill Smith, who's a retired fire captain from Fairfield in the Far East Bay. He kind of explained to me how difficult they are to prove. He told me there's a very small percentage, probably less than 5%, of alleged landlord arsons that make it to court. How are you going to link someone to arson unless you actually observe them doing it? It's that tough, end quote. It's very hard to prove. The evidence is in the ashes.
Like when you said that like 5% of, of them are to be found out, that kind of blew my mind. But what really blows my mind is that dude, Richard Singer, was caught because he basically like asked an informant to like set his building on fire, which like I can't imagine like, well, like what, did you go to like misconnections or something? Like what, like how did you get there? How did he get there? I mean, like, yeah, I'm obviously like glad he was caught, glad the building was not set on fire and shit, but like seems like a pretty lazy job if you ask me. I don't know, maybe I'm giving away ideas.
I mean, I know that landlords talk. They have live conventions where they talk about being victims to tenants that are out of control. Maybe he thought he was being smart, I can only guess, by hiring someone from New York, because perhaps it would be harder to link to him if this person had successfully gone in, lit the match, and then pieced out. Unfortunately, in this case, for Richard Singer, love to see it. Richard Singer was actually caught. The FBI actually did something good, perhaps by accident.
Someone's listening to this like a wannabe slumlord. Like, I beg to differ.
Yeah. Insurance companies and their investigators are well aware that landlord arson is an actual thing. In the 1970s, whole buildings like the Gartland, which was a few blocks northeast of the 22nd and Mission building, 1975 fire at the 5-story building that was the Gartland Apartments, left 12 dead. The Gartland's owner was Beatrice Present, and this was a landlord whose buildings had experienced as many as 20 fires in the 2 years preceding the Gartland fire. Yeah. So, I mean, coincidence?
I don't think so. I don't see it. I don't see what you're talking about.
I feel like you might be right on that one. Insurance companies, they're some of the first to look into the fires beyond what the local fire departments will investigate because they don't want to lose money. So Hockling Lu, his insurance company, the American insurance company, alleged that Hockling Lu neglected his property and thereby created conditions for the fire to occur. So it's not quite alleging that he lit the match, but certainly didn't hurt that there were all of these different things that were up with the building, including, missed inspections, and the fire alarm system was down and not up to code. That only made the inevitability of a fire like this more likely. A couple years after the fire, I did call the city to ask why the land remains empty. And so I called up the local politician who is now responsible for the Mission District, Hillary Ronen.
Boo.
Her office and her head of staff, Amy Beinart, explained that it was a, quote, sensitive situation. And at the time, the city was attempting to purchase the plot and build affordable housing there, but Hockling Lu refused to sell. We'd come to find out wanted to use insurance money to rebuild it and move market rate tenants into the building. That is, rich tenants into the building. But, it's not like the city, there's so many things that the city could have done in the past 8 years. Top of the list, if the city really wanted to, it could use the power of eminent domain, as it has so many times, to relieve the slumlord Hockling Lu of his property. But that seems to be something the city's only willing to do if it's going to benefit the rich.
Seriously, though, if there's any, God forbid there's any aspiring slumlords that decide to come for our necks saying, did Hockling Lu really set the building on fire? And I just want to say, yeah, he fucking did. He was directly responsible for the fact that, the windows were painted shut. They were glued shut. Fire alarms had no batteries. People were stuck inside. Somebody fucking died. And it's important to add that the city and its salaried henchmen, including SF politician and supervisor Hillary Ronen, have made an effort to turn a blind eye and absolve themselves for 8 fucking years. We are now 8 years. It is still a dirt plot, and it's accumulating wealth. And all of them have a hand in this. And in the same breath, they welcome above market rate condos, just like the one right next door to the empty lot at 22nd Mission, which is called Vita. And if you'd like, you can send your nuclear family offspring to the elementary school for a measly $40K annual tuition. In all seriousness, prior to learning about 22nd and Mission, I had no idea that landlords hiring professional arsonists and setting their own buildings on fire was such a fucking thing. And it absolutely makes sense. It goes hand in hand like cops and Klan. And this might be an even funkier analogy, but it's like the landlords are like the people's billionaire. Their entire existence is all about wealth hoarding and land hoarding, cutting costs, literally, in regards to building safety and inspection in this instance, maximizing profits. And I can truthfully say I've never really met a landlord that set out to keep a roof over someone's head. It's not really in their best interest. It's more so in their best interest to put the roof over someone's head who's going to be paying the most. Right. The ulterior motive is that, where is the best bang for the buck? Yeah,
absolutely. In between now and back in 2015, there were actually 2 additional fires at this spot. Kind of fishy that the fires happened. When does that happen on an empty plot of land, that there are these huge fires following an even huger fire that just happen to be big enough so that it makes certain that, at least for a while, makes it so that people who would have right of return to this land are stuck on places like Treasure Island, or perhaps by then, they'll have left the bay. In any case, by 2020, the landlord found a local architect named Ian Birchall, who was fine with taking blood money from Hockling Lu.
Count your days, Ian. Count your days.
And in addition to Ian, public relations consultant Kim Diamond were on a Zoom. And they were on a Zoom that I was also on with a bunch of people from the mission. Kim and Ian were on this Zoom trying to get buy-in from locals for Hockling Lu's 2020 attempt to build a new luxury condo building that has yet to go through. Kristen, would you mind reading one of the comments that was stated during the community meeting held by Hockling Lu, who was actually not on camera during the Zoom, but was listening, according to PR rep Kim Diamond?
I am disappointed you're working for a murdering arsonist. All people working on this project should quit. Hock Lu should build 100% public housing on this site. Every displaced resident should have the right to return.
Okay, thank you for your comment, was Diamond's response. I was on the Zoom for that meeting. The city requires these meetings as a formality before a developer moves forward with any large project. And rightfully, people were pissed about La Muerte de la Mission, de la Mission. I don't know if it's better if I attempt an accent.
I kind of like it. Keep doing it.
From my,
Do it again.
I did take 2 years of Spanish in high school.
I can tell.
Most of the people on this call had concerns about the gentrification. In addition, rich people living in Vida, which is what the 8,000 per month condos next door are called.
Wait, they're actually 8,000 a month?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the rentals are going for $8,000 a month. There's, you can also purchase a place, which is in the multi-millions.
They don't even look that nice.
No, they kind of have that, like, it could be anywhere globalization architecture look.
Yeah, I feel that.
I mean, the name Vida is obviously, it's a respectful of the local culture.
So much respect. So respectfully.
So these $8,000 per month condos, they sit above what was like a Peter Thiel and Mark Zuckerberg funded charter school that you mentioned, and the Alamo Theater. None of these places, specifically the condos, would not love it if their windows were facing the side of a building, which is what would happen if reconstruction occurred. In addition to the, probably several years that it would take to do the reconstruction, having the noise, people who pay $8,000 a month for a condo don't love that either, in addition to the shadows that the new building might bring.
God forbid anyone hears sound that lives in
a city.
buildings.
I know, It's true. Tommy Mecca, who is a longtime housing justice organizer here in the city, told me that he believed that until housing is seen as a common good, many landlords would continue to go to great lengths to maximize profits, even at the expense of human lives, quote, to preserve long-term tenants in their tenancy. That has to be a goal of the city right now, because reality is the biggest stock of affordable housing in the city is the rent-controlled stock. Very true. As we can see, like, arson is a thing that is probably far more common than we know. It's certainly far more common than we're able to prove in a court of law, because the evidence is burnt up. And we know that landlords, the greed part of their brain lights up in an MRI when they see money or they hear cha-ching.
The great takeaway on my end. So what happens at 22nd Street and Mission is not an anomaly. If it's one thing that landlords are going to keep doing, is putting profits and property above the people. But that doesn't mean us renters and squatters, honestly, are completely helpless, right? Every day is a fight to reclaim the streets and public space. And yeah, of course, the city is crawling with performative politicians, nonprofit directors, slumlords, and they all sit on their hands and asses. While, as you were saying, the MRI thing, I was picturing the Grinch, how his heart gets so big. So something like that, but money. They all sit on their hands and asses and continue to accept checks while waging a war on houseless people in the working class. And, they're proving it to us every fucking day. They write on their reluctance, their gross negligence and apathy as they rip away housing and shelter, literally burning it down. These are the exact same people behind the mass sweeps. They're acting as we speak to keep people unhoused and on the street in the midst of a massive storm. They did it during the fires, and they're doing it now. Squat everywhere now. They can keep the land acknowledgements, but in the meantime, we'll take up every vacant lot, every vacant luxury condo and hotel, and put up everyone we love and give a shit about. We'll continue to organize, hit the streets, and build networks of mutual aid for our neighbors. And by the time you're listening to this episode, I really hope that you are able to look outside and see sunshine. I hope that the rain and wind subside. And when you look outside, I hope you think about all of the people in the city that are fighting to keep each other alive against agents of violence, like slumlords, like Hockling Liu, politicians, and police.
I think when this episode goes up, that the Omni Commons in Oakland should be open for a temporary amount of time for people to stay there because, like Kristen mentioned, there's been a bomb cyclone, as they're calling it, that has caused some of the worst flooding, certainly that I've seen in San Francisco since I've been here. And the city has done so little to address that. It opened up 170 emergency shelter beds out of what the city said. As of last week, it was down 2,500 shelter beds.
Wow. Which is it's so casual that they're throwing around like bomb cyclone. Meanwhile, like literally, I'm sure everybody that's like in, office is just posted up in their big fucking house, one of them, and just chilling. Like,
yeah.
And those like 25, that the 2,500 number that you just said, those probably are strictly what's on paper.
Sure.
There's so many more. There's so many
right.
more people that are without shelter right now.
Yep.
And like, absolutely, like, it's what shelters are available is like important and absolutely needed right now. But these are not permanent solutions.
No.
And we all know we just need to take those fucking empty condos.
Yeah, the Solidarity Network, Food Not Bombs, people from other mutual aid networks have been working, Gay Shame, for example, have been working on getting people into motel rooms via some donations. So yeah, you can check out Solidarity Network. You can check out Food Not Bombs is always working through the year.
Love Food Not Bombs.
Yeah. Well, these issues are pretty dark, but you'd be surprised that like people don't know the prevalence of landlord arson. It's something that has been documented so many times. There's a documentary that people can check out, Decade of Fire, which is specifically about fires in the Bronx. Huge spate of landlord arson in the 1970s and 1980s. So this isn't just a San Francisco only issue. It is a wherever there are landlords issue.
Exactly.
With that, thank you, Kristen. Again, where can people find you and follow you if they so desire?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always, always, always a pleasure. If you want to hear more of my unsolicited opinions on just everything and anything, follow me on Twitter at JFChrice, J like joke, F like Frank, and Christ like Jesus _ or chzaz.com. I might ignore you or I might not.
Come back to give more unsolicited opinions very soon.
Super down.
Sweet.
All right.
Thank you for spending time in San Francisco, a podcast produced by Toshio Moronic and Caitlin Wood. We release a new episode every week with bonus episodes for subscribers of the show. If you like the show and have a few dollars to spare, please go to patreon.com/SADFrancisco. That's patreon.com/SADFrancisco to help cover the editing and transcriptions for the show. See you next time in San Francisco.